Hello there, everybody, and welcome back to Disconnected. I am here with Fran Simeoni, who is the founder of Radiance Films, who has taken the boutique world by storm over the last few weeks. Fran, welcome. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for saying I've taken the boutique world by storm. It seems a bit surreal, but I'll take it.
It's literally not even been a full 2 weeks since the original announcement, right?
It's all such a blur, to be honest with you. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it's hard to kind of track the time really, because it's been kind of living in my head for quite a while, and then there's been a lot of behind the scenes work, and then since going live, it's just been really full on. With everything that entails, but behind the scenes work, still going full steam as well. So yeah, it's a bit kind of crazy, but in a good way.
I imagine the last several months have been very stressful, but right now is most likely a whirlwind in your world. So I'm just glad that you could carve out a little bit of time. How do you feel about the response to everything so far?
I'm really pleased. I mean, I didn't expect it to be this kind of positive, really. I mean, well, not positive, but I mean, so sort of across the board positive. I expected a lot more griping, I suppose. When I was planning everything, I was thinking, I've got like loads of notes up here in front of the laptop, and I sort of said, do this and do that and have a unique slate. And so I was deciding what would be in the slate, and I was saying, I can have this, I can have that, and, let's have a film from this country and that country and this genre and that genre. And then I was constantly going back and forth. I had about 20, 30 titles, constantly going up as one deal would complete, and I'd be like, okay, it's going to be that one. And then another deal would drag, and I'd be like, okay, move that to the bottom. So I had, a slate that was constantly shifting. And the whole time I kept thinking, oh yeah, that's good. And then I, have that classic kind of thing where you go back and you'd lose your confidence and you go, oh no, maybe, people will say it's too this or it's too that. So I constantly had that in my mind. But to be honest, I don't know if people are just being polite or, generous because it's a new label. Yeah. But I didn't expect that. I expected more people to sort of say, well, it's not what I was hoping for, so never mind. Right. But yeah, it's been good, so I'm happy.
I completely understand the trepidation. There is seemingly these pockets in this community lately that are negative to a fault in certain situations, and when it comes to announcements, that's one of the easiest ones where people seem to come together to bash on certain things. I'm curious. I mean, for those that don't know, Fran spent a lot of time with Arrow Video, and now going into your new label. Is there certain things that you can see from the community that are perhaps the most negative that you could try to clear up right now so that people are not constantly pestering about
it? You mean negative things about the industry as a whole? Or?
Yeah, stuff people complain about. And I'm leading into one thing in particular, because I don't know if it's you that runs your Facebook, but you posted, or somebody posted something today that I think is really important to touch on. And I'm planning on talking about it over the next couple weeks, a few times actually. And that's just the unavailability of some titles. And I laugh every time a label announces any title, and inevitably there's going to be people complain about that one title, of course, and they'll say something like, well, why haven't you released this beloved, 1986 cult horror film? And they just don't know that behind the scenes, there's 19 layers of why that will never come out in the next 10 or 15 years at least.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm struggling to remember now what prompted me to write that, but it's me that does the Facebook. It's me. I mean, most of the stuff you see is me. I mean, I work, as has been announced, I'm working with various people behind the scenes as well. But in terms of the communications, that's me. But what I do with the social media, and I didn't kind of plan it this way, it just happened. But when I started Radiance, there wasn't a lot I could talk about. So I thought, well, I'll just tell people what I'm doing, because I know some people find that interesting. And as it turned out, a lot of people found it interesting, much to my
Absolutely.
surprise again. And I thought I should keep that going because people seem to enjoy it. And I thought that's obviously something I started. I need to kind of remember to stay true to my roots, I suppose.
Right.
So every now and again, I sort of think, what am I doing? Let's write about that. So something must have happened to write that up today. And that just kind of comes up, every now and again. You'd be working with someone, or I'll just remember a deal, do one deal. I think that was it. So I did one deal this week, and it's with someone I've worked with a lot, someone that's really easy. And part of what I wrote in the post, for anyone who hasn't read it, is that you'll often see films coming out from one place over and over again, and it's not one place, but there's loads of them, and that's the case because, well, there's obviously a lot of reasons, but speaking from my experience, because the company either is open, they've got their doors open, and they'll say, yeah, we're willing to sublicense, let's talk. And every company's got things they don't want to license, or things that are just silly. If a company's making a bundle of money on a film themselves, there's no point in sublicensing it.
Of course.
There's other things that might be stuck in legal problems. Those are the kind of the smaller issues, let's say. But anyone who's kind of looks at the detail, looks at who the licensor is, can probably work out. We get a lot of films from certain Japanese studios. We get a lot of films from some US studios and not others. And sometimes that's just because, like I said in the post, that company's kind of got their doors open. They're set up to sell. There's somebody there who's just really enthusiastic, who's doing a good job. And it's not to say the other studios aren't doing a good job. It's just that maybe they're not set up for it. It's not their thing, or they don't have people in jobs to do the licensing. I mean, I've spoken to people at other companies, and they'll sort of say, I'd like to do this, but I can't. I don't have the experience, or I don't have authorization. And then, these are big companies. It's very bureaucratic, and you can't always get in and find the right people. And the companies that do manage to get that done, that's great. But it doesn't mean that suddenly the floodgates open and you suddenly are going to see a lot of stuff from that company. Obviously, there's always exceptions to the rule, but that's kind of what I was getting at with the post today, because you do see a lot of people saying, why don't we have this and why don't we have that? And it is a frustration for labels, because we'd like to do those things, obviously, but sometimes there are these issues you just can't get around.
Of course. And then there's also two other factors. I mean, the most obvious one to me that a lot of people never consider is elements. I mean, film is degrading constantly, and depending on how it was archived, or if it was even archived, or do we even know where it is, that may never be possible. And with how people complain nowadays, unless it's a pristine scan, they're going to find something to nitpick. And I mean, that may not necessarily be worth it, especially if it's just an SD upgrade. So
yeah, absolutely. And that is, surprisingly to many people, much more complicated and unclear than it really has any reason to be.
Right.
And that's because films are these crazy things that are completely unlike other businesses. Films are often businesses unto themselves, in that they have companies set up to make them, and then that company's folded.
Yep.
And when someone's looking 30 years later, they'll sort of say, oh, well, who owns this, and where are the elements, and who bought it out, and where is it? And we had a film where it was an American production. We knew who it was owned by. We'd licensed it. And it was like, yeah, we'll just check their lab and we'll get the material out. And that happened. And they were like, we don't have it. So we spent like 2 years looking for it. And it ended up being in Italy, because, I don't know, maybe it had an Italian co-producer or something, but it was an American film. So sometimes you can get stuck in that situation, and maybe we even had announced that title when everyone thought, great, that's going to come. 2 years later, it comes out. So yeah, it's very complicated a lot of the time.
The other one I hear a lot is there are certain films that get released, 4 times, and they'll say boutiques have put this out 4 or 5 times already. How come? And one of the things that people struggle to really pay attention to as they complain about that is all 4 of those releases they're referring to are in different geographical zones of the world, so the rights are different. But on top of that, it's a smaller world than it's ever been. We are ordering from, you know, all these countries for people that are collecting or film fans. And yeah, you know, something like Miami Blues that Radiance announced, it's come out before, but that doesn't mean that it can't come out differently or in a different country or whatever. So people really need to understand that when you see, you know, Umbrella in Australia announce a title, that technically is really meant for Australians.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's something that came up recently with Miami Blues, that I put Blu-ray Premiere, because it's
Right.
a UK facing product. Someone in the UK is going to get that and go, oh, cool, it's never been on Blu-ray. And
Right.
frankly, that's the majority of the audience. You know, the people who are, you know, talking about being region free, or who are on forums and looking at releases in other territories, that's not really the majority customer. That's very much the minority. So, you know, when I was doing that, I didn't think to put UK. I mean, if you're in the UK and you go into a shop, it'd be a bit weird that it said you, in my view. But yeah, maybe something to think about for the future. But yeah, that was entirely the case. And you know, I think I said, when someone asked, yeah, you know, we'll look at things like that, absolutely, because whilst Miami Blues did have 2 releases in the US, I really liked the film and I never picked it up. So that's kind of the way I'm approaching things. I'm sort of thinking, you know, how am I sort of reacting to these films as a consumer? I may love them, but you know, if I think I would like this to be this way, and that's what would make me buy it. So that's kind of my yardstick. I'm just going about things that way.
It's smart, and I think that it brings to light another common topic lately in this hobby over the last couple months, and I'd love to hear your take on it. Is the idea of there being 2 sides of this. One is for the collectors that just love physical media; they're all about it. A lot of them, they don't open anything. They seem to be hoarders. And then there's the other side that are film fans. They are people that love everything that comes with it. They'll pour through every aspect of a release. And this is the first time in a couple of years that I've seen a label launch that genuinely feels like they are a perfect melding of both of those communities. How do you feel about the differentiation between those two?
That's something I really recognize. I think the when you say a melding, I mean, I think that's my personality, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I mean, the reason I laugh when you sort of say things unopened on shelves, I mean, I've got so much unopened on my shelves.
Yeah.
But having said that, it's not like I've got duplicates. You know, I am pretty good about that. I mean, I don't buy something and then go, oh, I've already got that. I do really know my collection from that perspective, and I said this recently. I'm not the kind of person who will sort of go, "Oh, great, a new release of, you know, whatever. I'm going to get it because I like the packaging or the cover art better." Sometimes I do like the cover art and the packaging better, but I think, do you know what? My release is perfectly fine. I would much rather spend that money on getting something new and adding to the collection, because I am sort of more the second part of your description. I'm more about the films. You know, I want to watch more films. I want to learn about more filmmakers and areas of film, and, you know, different genres and all that sort of stuff. So that's my focus, and that's nice of you to say. But yeah, that's kind of the focus for Radiance, really, to open up different areas. I mean, for all the time I was at Arrow, there were various things that I wanted to do that, and, you know, kind of got started but didn't get finished, and some things I just sort of thought this is never going to work, or I was just too nervous about it. And now, rightly or wrongly, well, we'll see, but I'm just doing it. So hopefully I don't go bankrupt. But yeah, there are things now where I'm just like, well, there's never been a collection of, you know, this genre or this thing. I just do it. So yeah, fingers crossed. But that's what's really exciting. And I think part of that seems to have come out in the announcement, and hopefully that's sort of captured people's imagination and they're willing to kind of go on the journey and discover some new stuff.
Well, I think that a lot of people are, and we'll get to like the 3-year plan and all that in a few minutes, I'm sure. But all of the feedback that I've seen, one of the things that people have touched on the most is something you've already brought up, and that's been your transparency through everything the entire time, sharing literally the conception of this, and literally running social media with a hand-drawn logo for a full year. Like it was such a DIY concept for people that have been inspired by this, that it was so nice to see it come to fruition. And I just, from afar, felt so proud that you were able to step away from something like Arrow and take it upon yourself to do this, and to witness that actual release and the full-blown birth of Radiance was just astonishing to witness. So to go back to the step before that with Arrow, how was your time at Arrow? What was 3 to 5 releases that you feel like were the most special, that you had a big hand in?
I mean, Arrow was a major, monumental part of my career. I mean,
yeah,
I was there for 12 years. When I joined the company, it was like 2.5 people, 3.5 people. It was me, the CEO who became the CEO. He didn't call himself CEO because it was like 2.5 of us.
yeah.
At the time, his aunt, who was the office manager, and a part-time accountant. And I basically came in, and I'd said as much, in the interview process and everything. I was really excited about Arrow Video, which was at the time quite unknown. I mean, I hadn't even heard of it, and I was a physical media fan. It was really in the shadows. And I saw what they'd done to that point. They'd done 6 releases or something. It was wasn't fully formed. It was like Masters of Jallo on one release, and then that had gone from another release, and then it was like Caligula, and then there was like Macabre and other stuff like that. And I was like, you've got to kind of bring this all together, and don't just do horror. I said, if you just do horror, you're going to be scraping the barrel in 3 years' time, and then you're going to need to do something else.
Yeah.
The company had Battle Royale, and I was like, it should just be full-blown, all cult, cool stuff like that, like blaxploitation and thrillers and all this sort of stuff. And amazingly, I was just allowed to run with that. So we did all of that stuff. Like I brought in loads of Brian De Palma films and just kind of got to play in that sandbox. So early releases that I'm really proud of. I mean, it's hard to single them out, but I mean, most of the Bavas I did, of the early ones I did, and really proud of those. Black Sunday, still really proud of, great release. I managed to get Vampiri, sort of unofficial Bava sort of debut, kind of like behind the scenes, as an extra, which was really cool. And other stuff like working with Tim Lucas and everything was really awesome. The De Palmas as well, just doing loads of cool stuff on that. It's going back quite a bit, so my memory is a bit blurry, because around this sort of time we were able to expand the teams. It brought more people in. So I'm thinking of Sisters, which I don't know if I actually produced Sisters, but what I eventually started doing, because it started expanding, was I was able to take a sort of more kind of executive producer role. So I'd sort of buy the titles and say, let's do this with this one, and let's get this person, let's try this kind of extra, and it was like collaborative like that. But the producers would kind of do the day-to-day work and talk to the critics and stuff. So I was kind of in the shadows.
Right.
But as time went on, the company grew and grew and grew. I became more and more in the shadows, to the point that in the end, I was sort of so in the shadows that I just sort of thought, this is boring. I want to get back in front again. I want to produce releases. And increasingly, as the company grew and demands grew in terms of expectations around size of title and sales and that kind of stuff, it did go towards being more like, let's get more The Things, let's get more American Werewolves and all that sort of stuff. And it became difficult to kind of do the crazy, weird
Right.
especially more academy-esque, and slightly less obvious genre stuff. So, I just sort of thought, I want to do more of that, and I want to get more in front of producing. And it's been 12 years. I think that's a long time for anyone in any job.
Oh, yeah.
So that all just kind of came together, and COVID happened. So gave me a lot of time to think and plan, and basically just realized I should try it and went for it.
I imagine taking that first, couple steps was terrifying after 12 years of not just stability, but Arrow was a little bit different than 3.5 people by the end there. I would imagine behind the scenes.
Yeah. I mean, around when I was making the decision, it was still just Arrow. It hadn't been bought by the Hut Group, and it was about just over 40 people. So it was, radical change from when I first started. And then the Hut came in, and some more people were hired, and just the kind of the feel and the size of the organization was a bit bigger. But to be honest with you, the Hut coming in didn't really change anything. There wasn't any kind of you have to do this and you have to do that, or not do this. There was nothing. It was just kind of like, you're the experts, you know what to do,
Right.
keep doing it. So from that perspective, it was fine, and didn't really make much difference. But the feeling that I described earlier, all of those things, they'd been in place for a few years, and it was kind of going that way. I mean, that's just the evolution of becoming a bigger company, having,
Of course.
more people, more of those kind of, very typical big company roles. You've got more people in more departments, more accountability, all that kind of thing. Eventually that kind of breeds that kind of, bureaucracy and, what's the word? Just that kind of,
It's very corporate instead of creative.
yeah, exactly. It does sort of go that way a bit more. And I've never worked in a corporate organization in my life, so that was quite alien to me.
Wow.
I come from a background of very small independent companies, and the idea of having everything triple stamped just makes me think of like Brazil. It doesn't work with the way I work, because I've got absolutely no experience of that, so
Right.
I just couldn't survive if it continued to go that way. I couldn't work for a studio, for instance. So for me, it was very much, just got to be grassroots, got to be indie, seat of the pants, all based on gut stuff, which is good. That's the way I work best, and I like it, so it's good.
And that is super important to know about yourself. There are a lot of people that are, whether it's circumstances beyond their control or they're just happy, doing whatever they're doing. You can actually choose a different accessibility route for yourself depending on how you feel that you are most successful. And following your, rise in Arrow and what has happened here, it appears that that creative side from Fran has to be a part of his everyday life to make it have that passion. So it is absolutely nice to see it come out, and even just hearing you talk about it now, it is quite evident.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's nice to have that flexibility and to be able to do that. I mean, what you say there in terms of being able to make decisions based on what works. I think that's as much what works for me as what works financially.
Right.
I think when I was at Arrow, I always sort of said I resisted the kind of I'm the curator role, because it was very much a team effort, and I didn't make all the decisions, and we bought lots of films that I just plain didn't like. Someone else liked them, someone else championed them, and that was always good. It was always like, if that's the film that you really like and you want to champion it, there's someone waving the flag for it, let's do it, because
Right.
It's not one person's dream and vision. It was never that sort of way, and that's something that I'll sort of continue to do. I mean, there's people I'm working with like Kat Ellinger and Tom Mez, who are the initial slate is pretty much all me, but we've started to talk about films and saying, what about this and what about that? And I'm screening them like, yeah, this is great. Let's definitely do that. So, I always have a collaborative outlook. And though I am sort of much more responsible now, it's still going to be that way. And it's, I've always enjoyed that kind of fan interaction. It was less direct at Arrow, but I mean, I've always, kept an eye on the forums and listened to what people are saying. And that's something that I think has come out more in Radiance, where, I've been able to, get rid of the BBFC ratings and, just do certain things with the packaging. So it was nice to be able to have that kind of clean slate.
Right. That's a really cool touch. And I'm glad that you could personalize it in the way that you can finally respond in a way that feels very Fran, basically. You brought up Kat and Tom. They are incredible people. They are very talented. I'm curious if you could share with everybody why them? Why are they the ones that you said, these are the ones that I definitely want to collaborate with?
I mean, I think probably because they're people I've worked with a lot, for a start. And, Tom was one of the first people I ever worked with at Arrow, I think. I had him and Jasper Sharp's book, The Midnight Eye Guide to Japanese Film at university. So I just sort of flicked through that, back and forth. I was checking up film titles. I was reading the book. And when I started at Arrow, like I said, we got Battle Royale. So my first thing was like, right, Tom Mes. So I got in touch with Tom and he was great. And we just had back and forth and it never kind of stopped. We'd always kind of share these emails and then talk about stuff and ideas, and some of which is in progress or, aside from Radiance or Arrow even. So that's been great. And then Kat was somebody else who I didn't work with as early as Tom, but worked with increasingly close. Is that the right way to put it? So, it started off as like essays and commentaries and stuff, but then it started to become, why don't you sort of like consult, produce this release? And we were talking more and more about films and films that we could release, like at Arrow. And then I produced a documentary for Arrow called Orchestrator of Storms about Jean Roland. So we worked really closely on that, and that released just after I left Arrow. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see it through, but such was the timing. So it was the experience of that that I just sort of thought, well, let's just keep that going because we had the seeds of it, and let's build it up and make it into something. And Kat wanted to get into producing, so it was a natural evolution, really.
I love the documentary, by the way. I think it turned out really, really good, and I think that it is like due time that people finally get a deep dive into Jean Roland, because not only it's been pretty difficult in Europe to see a lot of those films for the last couple decades, but even here in the US they came out on Redemption, and I feel like they get overlooked a lot for some reason, and he's sort of this singular director, so it's just nice to see that much attention and respect given to somebody like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it'd been a conversation for a long time because James Blackford, who actually works at Indicator now, but he was is a big Roland fan, and he brought up the idea of it. And I looked at some of the films that didn't really have time to get into it. Our slate was really packed, so we didn't really make it into an idea for a few years, really. But I have to sort of give credit to James for planting the seed. And that's the way it often happens. It's sort of like a seed's planted, and these things just take time to kind of germinate, because there's always so much on. Because the thing is with this kind of work is that you're often working, sometimes years in advance, and it takes research and waiting for rights to come up or material to be found, like I mentioned earlier. So there is quite a long gestation period. I think sometimes people sort of think you can just whip out releases in weeks or months, but yeah, it's sometimes really long.
Not to mention, this was being literally produced during the height of a global pandemic.
Yes, exactly. That hasn't made things easy. I mean, I think we're better now, but oh my God, in the beginning, it was an absolute nightmare.
Right.
Just because the file sizes and, doing everything over the internet, where especially on the restoration side, where you can't just, get in and oversee grades and stuff, which for our technical manager was really tough, but we're learning more now to manage that.
Well, speaking of restorations and grading, one of the things that is a big difference between your time at Arrow and what they're developing more into nowadays, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, and Radiance is UHD releases. And it sounds like you are not going to be touching those for at least the foreseeable future. Do you want to share with everybody why that seems to be the case?
Yeah, sure. I mean, never say never. There is potentially one title that could be a UHD in the future, if I can get it. But that's very much a minority case because, as you say, I'm not really looking at UHD a lot. That is mostly because the majority of the films I'm looking at are just not fit for UHD. A lot of them, don't have 4K restorations, don't have the budget to do a 4K restoration. I mean, this kind of stuff, like most of the releases, it's limited to 2,000 units, and sales beyond that are not guaranteed. So, if these things, if they sell out, then even then, you can't sort of prop up a business by having such front heavily loaded costs that a UHD takes. Not as a new business in any case. So who knows what will happen in the future, but right now, for me, the mission is much more about what we said earlier. It's more about the films than it is the other stuff. And for me, UHD is the other stuff because just being able to see these films in good HD masters, I think is a big win because they are definitely more challenging. And I think that the trouble with UHD is becoming apparent now. Whether or not it will settle down once the format is sort of more established, I don't know. But at the moment, I just sort of feel like the number of UHD releases we're seeing are far too many in the upgrade camp than they are in the new release camp. I mean, I'm not so massively sensitive about if you've got a really good Blu-ray and you've got a new UHD. Like I said earlier, if the release I have is good, I'd rather see something new than to see, oh my God, I can now make out that tiny detail. I'm still going to enjoy the film if I didn't see that detail, notice every single hair on the back of, someone's arm or something. So yeah, I'm not too worried about that right now.
Right. And I interviewed the guys from Deaf Crocodile, Dennis Bartok and his partner over there, and they mentioned that 4K restorations, they, for a good one at least, cost between $50,000 and $75,000 USD, and most people don't understand that. And their only caveat to that was unless people are just volunteering to do it for free, which I'm assuming is not happening for most of these releases. And so the ones that are getting UHDs, a lot of them already had 4K restorations. So it's a little cheaper to do those, I imagine that. But especially for a new company, you can't just, turn around and drop $60,000 on one title for a restoration.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the difficulty is with that as well is that it makes prices rise. And some of the UHD releases out there are already expensive enough as they are, in my opinion. That's something I've seen come up a little bit, where people just sort of saying, well, I don't want that other thing if it means it's more expensive. I'm okay with just like a simple package or just a Blu-ray.
Yeah.
So I think that's another big consideration because there's a lot of stuff out there, a lot of stuff people want, and it doesn't really make sense if everything's $50. To me, that's just a bit crazy. So yeah, I think there needs to be a bit better judgment. Not everything needs a UHD. And the thing is with that is that because not all of the masters aren't really good enough.
Right.
We looked at some 4K masters, and I will look at some for Radiance, and yes, they might be 4K, but they might not be HDR. You know, they might not have done a fantastic job. It might just be really sensible to just do on Blu-ray. So that's the other thing that I think at a consumer level is quite hard to understand, because you're not looking at the files, you're looking at a compressed version of it when it comes out on disc. When you've got the full 4K and you've got experts looking at it saying, you know, that's the decision I think the consumers need to kind of put their trust in and say,
exactly,
you know, if they didn't think it was good enough, then maybe not. And the trouble with that is there's always someone to try and prove you wrong, because whilst one label makes that decision, and unfortunately this happens very much in the business side of things as well, someone in another country will release it, and then everyone will go, but they released it, and then you just be like, yeah, but still not good. And
not to mention, I mean, there's format rights too. You might have the rights to Blu-ray, but not 4K.
That's very true from a studio perspective, for sure. But like I say, within the business itself, you know, sometimes you'll get a master and it'll be DNR to hell, and it'll, you know, be really challenging. And then you sort of go back to the licensor and say, you know, I can't really release this. And they say, why not? It was released in that other country. And they just sort of like, but they don't understand. There's the very little technical knowledge within the business as a whole, to be honest with you, because it is quite specialist. And I've only learnt it all from working at Arrow, like with, you know, experts at the company. I didn't know this stuff when I came in, not at all. So that is a real challenge, and you know, sometimes you just have to do what you can do and go on to the next thing.
But that's the cool thing, because these 10 films are a great thing to go on to. And one of the other aspects of this is to try to keep costs down, like you said. And with these 10 films, a lot of them are films that people had never seen before. And you said that they are curated simply by you for this first round for the most part. They are a fascinating, absolutely fascinating round of titles. Is there, if you can pick one, I know that's like a baby right now for you, but if you could pick one that you're like, God, I can't wait to see what the world thinks of this one, which one are you most excited about the response to?
Oh God, I don't know, because I think there's a few in sort of the same camp. So I think A Woman Kills and Red Sun are going to be really interesting. I mean, I think people are going to sort of watch them and think, wow, they're like real discoveries, because like, nobody's seen them. Like a lot of people I've spoken to, I've had to go to real experts in their field to just find people who'd seen the film or know the directors. I mean, even with A Woman Kills, like no one had seen it. So I'm quite fascinated to know what people make of those. So they're kind of one equal camp, I would say. I think the others, I mean, maybe Fill Her Up With Super, but although it's quite a different film, I really like Fill Her Up With Super. I think that's going to be one where people come away and sort of say, I love this film. Like it's my kind of vibe, and it's, you know, I think it's one some people will take to their heart, and other people will sort of be like, yeah, you know, it's okay. I mean, I've had real trouble kind of describing it, because it's not one of those films where you can sort of point to a lot of plot in the synopsis. It's a road trip, and just stuff happens, but not the kind of stuff where you can plot it out, because it's incidental. It's all about the moment. So if you sort of say it, you're spoiling the moment.
It's a vibe film.
Yeah, the comparison I made recently was like Sideways, another kind of road movie. It's like two people go on a road trip to wine country, and if you said everything that happened, you'd spoil it. I mean, it's the same for this. But it's similar in that it's also a comedy. It's got dramatic elements. This one is sort of much more, which I think is in the synopsis. It's much more naturalistic. I don't know. I have to kind of do my research a bit more, but I don't know what the first film to really use this technique was. But all the cast co-wrote the script with the director. They kind of workshopped it all for months, and during the process, they all became like proper friends as well. And and that kind of naturalness really comes out on screen.
Yeah.
But also in a very early representation of just fairness, which you just don't see in, well, many industries. But they all apparently got equal pay as well, the cast and the director, which is quite unusual. But that's just sort of the kind of filmmaker I think Alan Cavalier was. But he's had such an interesting career because he started off as like a genre director, and I like his genre films as well. But none of them were successful because everyone wanted to see, you know, new wave films or you know, audience pleasing stuff, and his films were a bit tougher. They had like a bit of a political bite to them, or just weren't in fashion. But they're cool. But so anyway, that didn't work, so he decided to do something else, and this is the kind of second part of his career, the something else. And then he sort of innovated again later on in his career. So he's a really interesting filmmaker. But yeah, with the other stuff, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to separate them, but probably one of those, I would say.
That's exciting.
I mean, I'm intrigued about it all, really.
Right.
Yeah, and the thing is that whilst I sort of focused on this, my mind's now on like the next batch.
Right.
So I'm also thinking about those. The next batch sort of more genre, really. I thought I'd put enough genre in the first 10, but it was quite interesting. A lot of people was like, oh, it's really art house. And I was like, oh, okay. But for me, I really like that cross between art house and genre. I like genre films which are sort of a bit more thoughtful. So there's more of that coming, which I think is cool. But yeah, that's kind of my thing, really. It's a bit of both, really.
Right.
I like films that are kind of a bit nuts and aren't obvious. You know, I don't hate it, but I find the problem is that you see a lot of films when you watch as many films as I do.
Yeah.
It sort of gets to the point where you think, I've seen this. It's not, you know, I want things that are more inventive and more unique. So that's kind of what I'm gravitating to at the moment.
I completely agree there. And reading through the synopses for these, there were multiple times that I felt like even just reading the synopsis, it was something that I would be thinking about for the next couple of days. Specifically, The Working Class Goes to Heaven and The Sunday Woman. I read the synopsis and I went, I feel like I have to watch these right now. It is just that intriguing to me. And I am always excited when I find a film that is sort of not heavy in a depressing way, but heavy in a way where it doesn't leave me for a couple days. And that's what reading these, it kind of feels like. It's something I'm going to dwell upon and really like sink into it myself. So I'm certainly excited about that feeling.
Yeah, that's really interesting you say that, because I think as a distributor, you kind of have a different outlook. You sort of have had this conversation so many times at Arrow, you know, with other people as well. But you sort of look at films, you sort of say, well, what's the feeling that people are going to get from watching this film, and what are they going to talk about? Why are they going to want to buy it? And I think for the most part, we assumed people want films because they're a good time or because they're an outright classic. People want them in their collection, and that does cut out a lot of films. We also sort of had this thing about comedies don't work, and that is kind of true in the industry. Like, comedies never kind of perform as well as other things unless they're one of the major classics, in which case they're not many of those. So I guess it's kind of ironic. I've got quite a few comedies, but what you said there in terms of something staying with you was a bit of a realization I had when I was putting the slate together, because there is one film I bought, which is going to be coming up, and it's brutal. It's so good. It really hit me deep. It's such an affecting film, but it's not a happy watch in the end. You know, it's, you know, a bit of a feel bad film essentially, but it's so good. I sort of thought, well, I have to release this because it's just amazing, and I was really nervous about it, but I just kept coming back to how good it was. And funnily enough, after doing that, I started reading people's reactions to sort of similar kind of feel bad films. And this is just a social thing, but people were like, you have to see this. I like cried my eyes out, or I was broken after it. And that almost became the thing, whereas like it was a challenge. It was like, oh, okay, yeah, I want to see how broken I'll be.
Right.
I kind of thought that's maybe the way that this can work. So I'm still nervous about it, but I think that's true. I think people will sort of gravitate towards things because it's an intense experience, and I think that's a bit. At least I've undervalued it. I don't know whether it's undervalued by other distributors, but yeah, that just kind of struck me, and so I'm glad you said that. And
Interesting.
Yeah.
One of the things with films like that, I always get this like overwhelming sense of empathy, I guess, and not that it makes me feel superior or anything, but to know that I can still relate to people in situations that I haven't experienced myself. That's why some of these more difficult watches are, I think, so important, because you are able to just feel like the humanity in it, I guess, is maybe a good way to say it. So I think that those are super important, and always something that a lot of people will gravitate towards, because sometimes you just need a shock to your system and realize I can still feel.
Yeah, people like to feel things at the end of the day. And it might, I've got various films sitting here that I want to get round to that I just sort of think, oh, I know this is going to be really intense. I don't want to watch it, but I do have it. I do want to get to it. But for me, for my tastes, that's more bones being snapped, or more sort of the horror, very intense horror, where I'm just like, oh, I haven't got the energy for this. But yeah, something more on the emotional side, I can kind of take that a bit more.
Completely get that. With the staying power of this and what you're planning on, it is, I'm assuming, immensely difficult to only be talking about these 10 films, because you're planning so far ahead, and there are certain people. I mean, obviously they've, the critics of physical media have been ringing the death knell for 20 plus years at this point. But when you are able to be a brand new label and announce that you're going to be selling a 3-year subscription package and sell that out in 2 different countries in like 28 hours in each one, or whatever it was, is an astonishing feat. So congratulations on that. But planning all that out, like how nerve-wracking was that for you?
It wasn't really, because I had no expectations. I didn't need to sell it out. I wasn't banking on it. It wasn't like make or break or anything like that. I just sort of thought this will be good to do. It's a bonus for me. Obviously I get a bit more cash, a bit more to play with. But I always think it's good to have champions, who are going to be there for the long haul, and who are going to be engaged with the label. And I wanted to do the Discord thing, and I kind of thought, well, that's the start of it, to engage with fans in a different way, and have something that's unique. So I just sort of thought, let's just do it and see what happens. If it's 5 people, fine. If it's all of the people, 100 people, great. So I just kind of left it at that. It was a surprise that it sold out so quickly in the UK. Once it sold out that fast in the UK, I thought, okay, US will sell out. I mean, I guess I've got enough experience to sort of know how things are going, and the rate of sales and the engagement. I just sort of thought, be all right. So I've got, confident, I suppose. But no, I'm obviously very, very pleased, and the engagement has been great. And I'm quite enjoying the Discord. I've got so many recommendations through that, and generally through the forums, which is just really encouraging, but also giving my watch list like a huge boost. Just so nice when I sort of see people sort of saying, oh, what about this? And someone else saying, well, that. And I think, yes, I've got that title. Yes, it's so nice to sort of think things are in sync. So that's cool.
That's, I'm assuming for a lot of the people that signed up, one of the things that would be sort of the main question here is, you've announced 10 titles, and really, you alluded to it earlier. There's no established genre. There's no Radiance Films is only producing these sorts of titles. Is there anything cohesive that you're going for with these releases, you think?
No, my brain's not cohesive. My tastes aren't. It's my tastes, I think.
Yeah.
It's films that I think deserve to, have a bit of exposure that aren't being done by anybody else. It's a mixture. I think initially there's stuff in there that I think could have been done by another label, but I need to kind of have a bit of balance as well, because if I just did all the crazy stuff, I would think I'd turn too many people off too quickly.
Right.
So yeah, I wanted to have a bit of balance, but I mean, also I like those films as well. So it's you're really looking in my brain when you sort of look at the schedule, I think. And then I don't know. It's, what can I say? That is what it is. I mean, it's totally selfish. It's just films I like for the most part. I think there's a couple in there that, like Cat and Tom, are responsible for.
Right.
But still, I'm looking at them and saying, yeah, this is cool. Let's do that. I guess I'll keep doing that as long as people buy them.
Right. I think that's one of the cool aspects of some of these smaller labels, is you get the opportunity to feel somebody's personality in the form of sort of a mixtape that they're delivering to the world, basically. And as we see more of these titles that are coming from Fran's mind, it just curates this idea for the world of who Fran is. And I had a recent conversation on here with somebody who is heavily into film programming and curation, and doing this, you are literally curating the taste for people that are along for the ride with you. And I'm just really excited to see where that is in 2 years, looking back and go, well, what are the first 45 titles from Radiance, and how is that such a part of Fran's life?
Yeah, I mean, me too. Obviously I've got quite a big growing list, and yeah, I mean, it's like you said earlier, you're looking forward to seeing which title, but there are some on there where I can't wait to get them out, because they're things that I've seen, and just feel so strongly about that. You think it's natural to share, isn't it? I think when you see something,
Oh, yeah.
you have your people where you're kind of like, check this out, this is really cool. So there's definitely an element of that. But yeah, I mean, equally, I'm fascinated to know where it ends up, because there are films that I'm sort of talking about that are, I think some of them are known, but only by the sort of select few. So it's really exciting to kind of bring those to a wider audience, because the people who do know about them have found it for whatever reason and become fans, but they're not in a position to, because they're not distributors, basically. Like, I know a few critics who are like, yeah, this is really cool. So it's nice to give those things a platform, and I'm really intrigued as to how kind of nuts it can get, basically. Yeah, which is intriguing.
While discussing this, I harken back to the days of the late 80s and early 90s, where you would literally give somebody a mixtape, and a lot of times that was bearing your soul to this person. And I'm curious, not films that you're going to put out necessarily, but if you are bearing your soul to these people that are along with the ride with you, what are 5 films immediately that you go, these are what have built Fran, and that's where I have come from?
Oh, that's an ask. I always find it's difficult, because it's it kind of creates expectations,
Right.
because I think my tastes are really varied. I think that's one thing everybody said to me, was like, I can't believe it's so varied.
Right.
And I'm like, well, I like lots of different films. I mean, 5 films. I mean, Buñuel is my favorite director of all time, I would say, probably. So something Buñuel. I don't. I mean,
Maybe 5 directors would be easier.
Yeah, it's hard to pick one. I mean, when I say Buñuel, I usually just sort of pick That Obscure Object of Desire, which I go back and forth between that and Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie, or Yeah, Exterminating Angel. I mean, he's made so many good films. Godard is another one. I'm a big Godard fan. I mean, I love the way he reinvented himself all the time, and I do kind of love meta cinema. You know, I think it comes back to that kind of, I've seen this before, so it's exciting when you see something done slightly different. You know, I really love Weekend. I'd say Weekend maybe is second pick. I do like that intersection of art house and genre that I mentioned earlier. So I'd probably say Jean-Pierre Melville, The Samurai.
Wow.
Definitely up there for me. What else? How many is that? That's 3. Yeah, I mean, it's just, there's just like floods of films coming. I just sort of think, yeah, what else? I'm trying to sort of not touch on Radiance too much, I suppose. But I think the difficulty is it's very easy to sort of say these great big directors who all their films are out, you know, for the most part. Or, you know, you can watch them. But what I really love is being able to see something a bit like that. Like Jean-Pierre Melville, great director. We've had all these films, basically. And then when you sort of think, oh, okay, you know, what's like Melville? You just kind of look to Italy, you're like, oh, Fernando De Leo. I really like Fernando De Leo. He's great, but he's not Melville. The idea that you could just go from one to the other is just silly. I really like, you know, Poliziotteschi and crime films in general, like from all countries, like Man on the Roof, you know, great crime film. So that's what it is, I think, really. It's starting with one thing and then making that journey. And that's kind of, well, that's my job, I suppose.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, getting to Man on the Roof was like a major hype, because you sort of look at the film and you think, yeah, okay, I know this film, it's supposed to be good, and then you watch it and you're like, this is great, and then you get the film and then you get to put it out. So, you know, that's the exciting part of it. So it's difficult to sort of say, oh, you know, 5 films that made me, because what I think is really interesting is like the 5th step from those films. So it's okay, The Samurai, great, okay, but then you make that journey and then you've got, oh, okay, Man on the Roof, awesome. So yeah, that's why it's hard to pick the 5. But yeah, going off in those directions, like a bit Buñuel, a bit crime, comedy. Yeah, I mean, comedy is a big thing. There's various comedies in the lineup, but there's also like freaky stuff as well. Like, I do like a freaky film. Sometimes I worry about myself. You know, I'll kind of watch a film and it will be like really confrontational. Like, what's a good example? Like a Singapore Sling, Nikos Nicolaides. We looked at this when I was at Arrow, actually, and never got far with it. It was rejected because the master wasn't good enough.
Right.
But I looked at it and I was like, I don't care. I think it's so good. I watched it and I was like, this film's awesome. It's amazing. And then afterwards I was like, oh shit, it's really depraved. It's like necrophilia and it's all sorts of like abject stuff.
Right.
And I watched it and I was like, God, maybe I'm a bit weird. But I just thought it was awesome. Like I thought the film was really good. So I tried to get it for Radiance and couldn't because of music rights issues. Basically, I got in touch with the estate, who are really nice, and I wanted to do loads of Nicolaides films because he's such an interesting filmmaker. But sadly, like pretty much all of them are trapped with music issues. So that put that to bed. I did offer to sort of help and clear the music, and ultimately they weren't very comfortable with it. So it just kind of fell apart. I'm thinking about doing a Nicolaides book instead, because you can watch the films on YouTube, and the quality's okay. You know, it's perfectly serviceable for YouTube.
Interesting.
Lower your expectations. But yeah, so something like that, like just weird and nuts, would be the other tangent to explore, I suppose. So yeah, real mixture.
That is a good thing.
That's the spice of life.
Exactly, and that's what makes like these first 10, this original slate is such an interesting aspect, because none of them are really too similar, in my opinion. They're very, very different, and it's again, it'll just be nice to see that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm intrigued to see people sort of watching things that are really different,
Right.
and that's something I came to appreciate Arrow. I think maybe when I started at Arrow, I had narrower tastes, perhaps. And then, fast forward 12 years, I don't know how much that changed. I was always, I've got books on my shelf which probably indicate, or easier to indicate, more than my Blu-ray collection, because that's massive. And all my film books I've put behind me for easy reference. And I've got like books on blaxploitation and Goddard, poles apart, really, of all these different subjects, like Altman, Romero, and all sorts. So I think I've always had pretty broad tastes. But I think that's what's interesting from a boutique label perspective. I think a lot of people sort of think, oh, well, what's your thing? Why isn't it kind of more focused? And I'm like,
Right.
well, because I'm not going to do 10 titles a year. I'm going to do like 30. If you want to have a really narrow niche, you can't do that unless you release rubbish.
Right.
That's within one genre. But
That's not a rule. Nobody had to,
Oh, exactly. Yeah. So when people say that, I'm a bit like, but why would I be? Why would I be narrower? Why would I limit myself?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Trying to be, respectful of your time. I've got two more for you, real quick. We mentioned that journey. What set that journey off for you when you were younger? What instilled that passion for film for you?
I don't think it's any one thing. I mean, at least I don't remember. I know a lot of people say they remember their first trip to the cinema, but I don't at all. I think I went before my memories start.
Yeah.
So I can't point to a single thing. My granddad, I mean, everyone in my family likes films quite a lot. They're not big film fans, but they're like, yeah, let's watch a film or talk about films, just from a pop culture perspective. No one's like a cineast or anything. But films are always there because of that, because everyone kind of likes films. So my granddad was the kind of family librarian, I suppose. He had this big collection of VHSs that he'd record off the TV, and they'd all be labeled, and he had a little book, and it'd be like, right, what do you want to watch? Yeah. I can't think of an example. Heat, Robert De Niro, 29. Nice. That's the way it was. So I was watching all sorts of stuff like that, like lots of De Niro and Pacino when I was way too young. I think I watched Dog Day Afternoon when I was like 10 or something. It's a bit too young for that. So it probably started there, and I did exactly the same thing. I don't know, I just copied him. It's just buying VHSs, recording VHS off the TV, recording films off the TV onto VHS, making my own labels and all that sort of stuff. But I've always been like a bit obsessive and like order to things and have my collection in a certain way, VHS and then DVD and then Blu-ray and so on. So yeah, it's been a bit of a lifetime obsession, really, and was just very lucky to be able to get into it, because I never planned it this way. So
I think it's a more honest answer. I think a lot of people that respond, I went to Airplane when I was 11, and that was the first thing that set it off, is probably not entirely accurate. For most people, I think it'd be more like traditions. And every Friday night, my family went to a video store, and we did this, and it's my favorite memory because we did that every day for 3 years or something. So yeah, I can really grab onto that, because it's a lot of us were like that, especially those of us that collect nowadays, because we had that same VHS catalog.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right, because it is about creating those memories. And I think that the sad thing for the industry nowadays is that I don't know, maybe I'm being nostalgic here, but I kind of feel like there is going to be a little bit less opportunity for that if you're just pressing a button to access something off a streaming platform. I remember being in the video shop for like an hour, like getting a load of stuff and choosing what we were going to rent and stuff. And just remember being there all the time. They must have thought we were crazy. But, we would just go in, like in the summer holidays, we were there every few days. And that was like the best thing, and now I just don't think it's appreciated as much. So it's a shame. And that's the challenge, I think, for distributors, is engaging a younger audience and kind of getting them to care, I suppose, really is the thing, because this is definitely something for older people. And I think younger people are coming and getting into it and realizing, to your point earlier about physical media and the whole market and having a 3-year thing at the point it's supposed to be dying, I'm coming around to the idea that it's in pretty good shape, actually. And I think we will be in good shape, because thinking about the whole thing about VHS and recording off the TV has made me sort of think, well, maybe that's just what streaming is now. We could all have recorded stuff off the TV before, and in theory we had a copy. But I certainly went and bought stuff I'd recorded because I wanted a proper copy.
Absolutely.
And I'm seeing that a lot more now. A lot of people sort of saying, yeah, okay, I know it's there and I can watch it whenever, but I want to own a copy. And I think that is going to become more prevalent in, the culture, essentially, because people are going to watch something and it's disappeared. And when it's a great film or a film they really like, they think, well, yeah, I want to own that. I think it's just kind of natural. So it's going to hopefully mean labels stay around a bit longer.
That, and then the aspect of it's probably a generational thing, like you said, but the people that are making the actual effort to create more shared experiences that aren't necessarily about a theater. So whether that's showing stuff to friends at home, or like me, I've got a Discord just like Radiance, and every single month we get as many people as we can and we all watch a movie together. And those sorts of things can literally change, the mood of an entire month for somebody if you have just a perfect time and create these memories and build a real community. So it's so nice when you make those sort of connections and make it something that's tangible and means something to people.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. That's it's nice to hear that things like that are happening.
I just to pull at heartstrings for a second, the other big thing is I live like 950 miles away from my sister, and we basically have watch parties all the time where we put on the same movie at the same time, and just due to technology, FaceTime each other. And it's something that people aren't really talking about, that is still important, because those familial memories can genuinely last a lifetime and connect people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what better to have a talk about than a film that you've just shared together, and like you say, if technology can bridge that gap, then that's amazing.
The last thing, any interesting stories about these acquisitions for this first 10 films that you could share that haven't been talked about publicly yet? Anything where negatives were found in some dumpster in Philadelphia, or had to make some crazy negotiation with somebody in Bangladesh or anything?
I don't think so, unfortunately. I think probably all the drama is probably within the film's history prior to me getting there, really. I mean, I think the one with the craziest story is A Woman Kills, really. I mean, that's pretty nuts. I mean, for anyone who doesn't know, that was kind of made at the height of the Paris riots in 1968, and the director's earlier film was banned by the authorities. They absolutely hated it. They wouldn't let it be exported. And then the rushes were seen for the feature for A Woman Kills by Anatole Doman. He was a legendary producer in France who produced films by Godard and René and Borovchik, and he really liked the film. They couldn't find a distributor because the distributors, maybe because of the banning thing, I don't know, but they looked at it and they said, oh, you can't classify it. There's no stars to put it through. It's got sex scenes in it and nudity and stuff, but it's not an erotic film. It's got a crime element to it, but it's not a crime film. It's kind of horror-ish, but it's not proper horror film. So they rejected it, and it just kind of sat on the shelf, unfortunately. Jean-Denis Bonin, I think he kind of gave up a bit, maybe, from the whole banding thing, lost confidence, I don't know.
Yeah.
And it wasn't seen until 2010 when I can't remember the programmer's name, but someone kind of had carte blanche at the Cinémathèque Française, and he'd just play all this crazy stuff that was really rare and not seen, and he chose A Woman Kills.
Wow.
And after the screening of it, loads of people, Jean-Denis Bonin was there, he did like a Q&A, I think, and loads of people came up to him and said, oh, we want to buy a copy, we want to show our friends. And he was like, it's not out. They hadn't even finished the credits because it had just been lying there because it wasn't picked up. So conversations started not too long after that, and Luna Park Films finished the film. They kind of stitched it, the audio, and made the credits and so on. It was pretty much all done in terms of the film itself, and they released it in 2015. But because France had kind of turned its back on the film, they thought releasing it at a festival outside of France would be good. Unfortunately, it went to Lausanne Festival in Switzerland, which is not a very big festival. I didn't even know they had one. So not many people saw it, at least on an international scale.
Right.
If it had gone to sort of a more genre festival, it would have hit that circuit and been seen by people. So it was just released in France. Nobody kind of knew it existed. And I can't even remember how I found it. It's purely by chance. I managed to screen it, and I just sort of thought, this is crazy, and like the story is amazing, and it needs to be seen. And the short films, arguably, I think are almost as good or better than the film. Like the film that got banned, I think is really fascinating. Jean-Denis Bonin was kind of like this filmmaker, like the documentary that comes with the disc is called On the Margins, but it's true, he was like a filmmaker on the margins. He was good friends with Jean Rollin, actually, to call back an earlier conversation.
Nice.
He and Rollin were friends, worked together, the same kind of news recording company that sort of go and film like actuality footage, and they worked with similar people. Roland actually has a small role in the film, and he and Roland and maybe Borowczyk as well, and I forget his name now, but there was a few people kind of working in France at the time in this kind of cinema, which wasn't what others were doing. It wasn't new wave. It wasn't kind of, for the masses. It wasn't old fashioned. It was entirely new, but it was different, and it was not what people were used to. So there's this really interesting other side of cinema with these guys, and Alan Rob-Grillet is the other person I was thinking of, like just, different, more sort of confrontational, or and it's really fascinating to see that this was sort of bubbling along at the time, alongside what everyone thinks of when they think of France in the 60s, and there's this whole other thing going on which is just its own thing that isn't even discussed. There's no books about it, and there's no real study dedicated to it, but there it is, and I think it's fascinating.
And that's the importance of all of this, archival of films, so that we don't lose literally some of this history. So, companies like Radiance are incredibly important. So I wish all of the continued success and support from the community, because you never know, one of these next waves might be saving a film that was on the brink of being lost to time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with A Woman Kills as well, and with any release, but actually a lot of the releases, it's nice to get them out while the directors are still alive.
Oh yeah.
So they can appreciate it, and know that their films were seen by more audiences. Red Sun was another one. Never been seen outside of Germany, really.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. Fran, thank you so much. This has been a fascinating conversation. I really hope it is meaningful to everybody. I hope you enjoyed it, and maybe in a couple more waves of announcements, maybe you can come back and talk about where your mixtape is landing up then.
That would be great. I'd love it.
Thank you for your time, and everybody, thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Have a good night.
Thanks for having me.